Good morning. I'm Katie Dutcher from Flourish and Bloom in Monterey Bay Meditation Studio. And over these last few weeks, I've been talking about courage. And I have all these notes and things around me to remind me of what we've been talking about. The first one a couple weeks ago was what is courage? What it is, and really like what it's not. How it doesn't have to be huge and dramatic. It definitely doesn't have anything to do with being fearless, but it's really acting um, within fear, doing the thing you need to do, or being the way you need to be while you have fear. So that's what it is. Um, and then the next part was about um, how do we how do we kind of act with courage, and so how do we um, move forward when fear is here, and so today I want to talk about um, a different kind of courage. A lot of times, um, again, we kind of see courage as like action, right? Like going out and doing something. Something it's a big thing or a small thing, and it seems scary, it seems daunting, and then you do it. And so it seems like this really kind of assertive, powerful move, and it is. And there are other types of courage or other times when courage is needed, that may not be so obvious and may not feel like courage at the time. And so what I'm talking about here in my workbook, the courage amidst uncertainty, I call it the courage to wait. There's the courage to act and the courage to wait. And this can be a lot more challenging for most of us. Acting can be scary, but waiting, not kind of doing something, can be excruciating. And that's why it takes courage. So I'll say a little more about what I'm talking about. So perhaps there's a time of life where there's a process happening and it's a slow process, but it's a good one. Right in the middle of it, often that's when it it is most painful, right? As things are moving along, but they're not feeling good yet because it's that messy middle part. That's an example of the courage to wait, to kind of slowly wade through the middle, and often it's a long middle part. Um, think about, well, let me give a couple more examples. And some of these are things that I'm looking at right now. So, I'm working on physical therapy to help out my posture and pain and tension in my back and neck. And I don't know how long I've been at it, less than a month, but and I'm spending a lot of time on it, and um, it's painful. It's not easy, and right now I still have quite a bit of tension. I feel like it's going to take a while. It might feel like it's more painful or more awkward before it's better. I didn't really expect that. I kind of forgot that that might be part of it, especially this piece of awareness. Often, when we move from ignorance of something, like I was kind of ignorant about my posture, um, to knowledge and kind of competence, we have to pass through this period of time that is the most painful, where we begin to have awareness of what is not quite right. So that's great. That's a step on the road. And yet, we still don't have the competence to make it better. So for me, for example, experiencing where so many times throughout the day, I am very aware of the pain and the discomfort in my body, more aware than I was before. And yet I still haven't crossed into getting a lot of relief from that yet. So it's this middle part that can feel really discouraging. It can feel slow. Um, we also have a lot of examples coming from nature. Um, for example, winter. Even I'm in California and we don't have harsh winters, but we are having tons of rain. And I know that I'm from Ohio, and a lot of parts of this country and of the world have winters where, just everything looks dead. It looks lifeless. It's a long period of time where it's just everything is dormant, and really everything in life, in nature, has cycles like that. It goes through periods of really like blossoming and flourishing, just amazing. And then in order to have that, it must go through this dormant time. And even in that dormant time, things are happening, we just can't see them. Another one, and this image is really lovely for me right now, just thinking about caterpillar into butterfly. So if you think about it, when a caterpillar goes from being a caterpillar into a butterfly, it is not a gradual process that you could see. Like, it's not that day by day this caterpillar just like, first it has little wings and then they grow bigger and bigger and then all of a sudden it's a butterfly. There's nothing where all along the way you could say, yes, this progress is happening. It's a caterpillar, goes into the chrysalis, and there are there's a time in that chrysalis where this caterpillar is just mush. It's not even a caterpillar. It's not even a lowly caterpillar. It's just mush and mess. And then that the miracle of it is that then that mush reorganizes itself into a butterfly. And so that mush period in the middle where it's just like, what the heck is even going on? I don't want to be here. And in that period, it's pretty normal if we can't really see that final form that's coming, the butterfly. We may even just think, man, I should have stayed a caterpillar forever because that was better than mush. Um, there's this is why I love this image, because it's so vivid. So there's that middle stage. One more nature image, and I love this one too. It's about a lobster. A lobster, has this tough shell, soft inside and hard shell, and yet lobsters grow, but their shells don't grow. And so what happens with a lobster is it gets to a point where its shell is uncomfortable. It's tight and uncomfortable. And so it has to molt. It molts the shell. And so that hard armor piece is gone. And for that period of time, the lobster usually will kind of shelter itself or kind of hide away a little bit because it is very soft, and it takes time for the new shell to kind of grow and harden up. So again, this this lobster has to go through this time of vulnerability, like actual vulnerability of being soft and unarmored. And that's the only way that it can get bigger. That's the only way that it can expand, is to get rid of that thing that's protecting them, but also holding them back, and then be soft and vulnerable, and then get bigger and get stronger. Amazing. I love these metaphors. Um, and so the reason I love them too is because we learn from them. We can think like, if all of nature is like this, why wouldn't I be like this? Why would I think that I can just go from strength to strength and from highlight to highlight without any mushy, messy, vulnerable stage? So this is really helpful, I think. And so during this time, what does courage look like? It doesn't necessarily look like this assertive, dashing acts, right? It looks different. And so here are some of the things that I would say about about what courage looks like in these vulnerable waiting times. It looks like staying present. I think that's a big part of it. Staying in the here and now, even though it feels vulnerable, it feels, you feel impatient with it, it feels scary or unpleasant. So, staying with yourself, staying with this moment, staying present rather than numbing out, distracting, all these other ways that we could find to be not present. I'm not saying, I just want to balance this too, that I'm not saying 100% of the time staying present. Sometimes we do need a little break. We do need a little distraction, and we can give ourselves a break, right? But but then whenever we can, we just come and stay present with this. And it's really it's out of love. It's out of this refusal to let yourself alone. That sounds maybe weird because I'm talking about, staying with yourself. But I think you probably know what I mean, that you can leave your kind of emotional, spiritual self alone and send your brain somewhere else, or you can be all together right here. And that's an act of love. It's saying, this is mushy right now. I don't even know what's happening, but I'm willing to experience it because it's just part of things. It's part of my life. And with that, um, courage also looks like um, remembering, like reminding yourself of this bigger picture, that there's some whole journey happening here that we don't really know all the steps of yet. So keeping that perspective, reminding yourself of what some of the things I'm talking about here, the seasons of life. Um, it's refusal to stay in this thing of like judging, hurrying yourself along, worrying about this. I know for me, sometimes when I feel a kind of a low time coming along, it's like constant problem solving. I want to be like, what's going on here? What do I need to do? How do I need to make this better? How can I get to the next step? Because it's anything to just not be here in the awkward middle part of it. So it's keeping that door open and cultivating patience, cultivating that larger perspective, reminding ourselves that every single thing changes, even a low period, even this vulnerable spot cannot last forever. It can't. And and then also, and I love this part too, reminding ourselves of the mystery. There's this really intriguing mystery here, and like it's kind of like I was saying with the winter, stuff is going on, things are happening underground in the dark, and we can't see them. A tree, if you look at a tree right before it starts to bud again in the spring, it just looks like a dead tree. You can't see anything happening, but things mysteriously are going on, and will be revealing themselves at some point in time. And it's the same with us. There may be a lot going on even in just the subconscious, and what we're not aware of, that is kind of connections forming, strengthening. Who really knows? And that's the mystery. We may only know very much later some learning or some growth that came out of this vulnerable, um, hard time. And so courage looks like staying present. It looks like turning away from judgment, from um, fixing things like that, and really just waiting with this quality of patience, of compassion, because it is hard. It is really undeniably difficult to be in that time. Um, and so showing that. That's another thing that courage can look like. We may feel in this time of mush or this almost like ignorance of what's going on, we may feel like um, just impatient with ourselves, but showing love to ourselves, doing the best that we can to take care of ourselves in that time, that's another act of courage as well. We may not even feel like we deserve it because we don't even understand what's happening with ourselves, but continuing to treat ourselves with love, with care. Um, and sometimes it also looks like just moving on with one little next step as it presents itself. That's what courage looks like too. There's a few different poems that I've been really loving right now as I think about this. Um, I I don't think it's probably okay to read the whole poem. They're not my poems, but I will. I want to just give a couple little snippets and definitely the titles and the authors. So one is David White. I always love David White. This is a great book, River Flow, and this poem is called Sweet Darkness. And he talks about going into the dark when your eyes are tired, going into the dark. And I love this little snippet at the end. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Love it. So there's the image, and you can read the whole poem um, of the darkness going into the dark and this expanding out of what is too small for you. Um, Two others. There's a poem, love it, called A Blessing for One Who is Exhausted. That's by John O'Donohue. And I'll put these below in the comments. Um, and he really just talks about this time of, calls it empty time, where you're tired, you're exhausted. It's like a dark point in time, and sadness is there perhaps. And he instructs in these different ways of what to do. And he says, take refuge in your senses. Open up to all the small miracles you rushed through. So I love that. That kind of speaks to being present, staying in your body, in your senses. Um, he talks about become inclined to watch the way of rain when it falls slow and free. Imitate the habit of twilight, taking time to open the well of color. He says, draw alongside the silence of stone until its calmness can claim you. Be excessively gentle with yourself. And these are some of the big, I think, courageous things when I talk about caring for yourself. From this, I'm hearing go to nature, learn from nature, its slowness, its sort of patient qualities, that it just does as it does, and it's slow and it changes. So learning from that. And then the other one is by Juan Ramon Jimenez. It's called Oceans. And in this poem, he says, I have a feeling that my boat has struck down there in the depths against a great thing, and nothing happens. Nothing. Silence. Waves. Nothing happens? Or has everything happened? And we are standing now quietly in the new life. And that one's pretty magical to me. This idea that there's this sense that down there in the dark there's been some kind of jolt, and it feels like nothing is going on, or maybe something amazing and big is going on. All of these poems really speak to what I'm talking about here, about the like seasons that come through that maybe are not our favorite kind of seasons, and yet they're necessary. They're part of our life. And so we can get this knack as we recognize that we're in this season. um, we can get this knack of staying present, of recognizing it as courage. I really think it's important to know that we're not just weak, we're not just a mess, but it may feel like that, but we're also courageous by just maintaining our dignity and our presence and our care for ourselves in the midst of it. That's also what courage looks like. So let's take a few moments to just let it sink in, a little time to reflect and meditate. You can let your eyes close. Let yourself take a few breaths. Perhaps there's something that is striking a chord with you, something you remember. Or maybe this is just chiming with something that's happening for you right now. After all, as I'm recording this, it is February. It is that winter period. And a lot of what we're talking about here is really core to the practice of mindfulness. It's moving from resistance to acceptance and seeing how that changes everything. We can allow ourselves to be more than one thing, to be so multifaceted, strong and weak, vulnerable. It's a sign of strength, actually, and intelligence to be able to allow such ambiguity, such a big range of options, to know that you contain multitudes. That you are capable, not just capable, but obliged to go through seasons of life. When we think about some of our best, strongest, most meaningful, close relationships, They are usually relationships in which there have been hard times as well as good times. That's where the strength comes. You support your friend, they support you through your hardest time, and they refuse to let you go. They refuse to ignore you or abandon you, even when things are difficult. And that is really what strengthens the relationship, makes it valuable. And this is the kind of relationship that we can also cultivate with ourselves. Strong and durable love and caring. It isn't just about when you feel like you're on top of the world. It's just as much about staying with, being present in these difficult, vulnerable times. That's the kind of friend we want to be to ourselves. If you are feeling like you're in some season like this, like what I'm describing, there's no denying that it's difficult. And because of this fact, because it's difficult, because there may be fear and uncertainty, living through it day by day, moment by moment, is courageous. May you really sense and acknowledge your own courage. As you're ready, letting your eyes open. Thank you for joining me here. I'd love to hear an email or comments, just whatever thoughts you have about this. If you are watching these videos in real time, know that I won't be able to do one next week. I'm off to a really wonderful retreat that I'm helping to lead, and I'll be back the following week. Take good care.